all will be covered today in China Undercover. If you find our information helpful, please subscribe and turn on the notification. It will help us get more motivation to produce more quality videos. Now back to the news. Half of China's top military leadership disappears successively. On September 18, 2023, there is something big which happened in the Central Military Commission. For those who have been closely observing the Chinese Communist Party system and are familiar with its political maneuvering, here's the conclusion we can draw. Among the 2 vice-chairmen and 4 members of the Central Military Commission, 6 individuals are now confirmed to have been taken down and have disappeared simultaneously from critical public high-level meetings. One of the vice-chairmen, Zhang Yuxia, is among them, along with 2 members, Defense Minister Li Shangfu and Chief of the General Staff Liu Zhenli. This essentially means that half of the top military leadership of the Chinese Communist Party has been sidelined. Let's take a moment to recall Xi Jinping's biggest anti-corruption moves within the military, which primarily targeted the Central Military Commission. It all began with the successive takedowns of Vice-Chairman Su Kaihu and Guo Boxiong. Su Kaihu was arrested on March 22, 2014 from the General's Building on the 6th floor of Beijing's 301 General Hospital. At the time, he had only 1 close bodyguard with him. Yet hundreds of personnel from Beijing's Garrison District 3 Brigade were involved in the operation. On the other hand, Guo Boxiong was arrested on April 9, 2015, over a year later with a state of martial law imposed around the Wanshu-Zhuang area in Beijing. Tensions were high. However, the training and operations of the Chinese Communist Party's military for 11 years. He had deep-rooted connections, and his influence spanned from the central headquarters to various major war zones. The authorities had to be cautious about leaks and the potential for him to incite rebellion if his arrest was mishandled. Therefore, extensive planning was involved. Despite these precautions, it's evident that the removal of these 2 figures, known as the 2 tigers of the Central Military Commission, was a year apart. This highlights the complexities of maintaining the normal functioning and chain of command within the military and preventing chaos. In 2017, within a month, both Zhang Yang, the director of the Political Work Department of the Central Military Commission, and Fang Fengwei, the chief of the Joint Staff, fell from grace. However, unlike Xu and Guo, they didn't have the red aristocracy background and deep connections. They were arrested after them, and their downfall was linked to the long list of corrupt military officials associated with Xu and Guo. This was part of clearing out the remnants of their influence, but this time it's different. This time we have seen the simultaneous removal of 1 vice-chairman and 2 members of the Central Military Commission. Not only is the scale unprecedented, but these individuals were considered part of Xi Jinping's so-called completely loyal inner circle, which he established during the 20th Party Congress. So the question arises, after dismantling other power factions and now this move, when will the anti-corruption and power struggle within the military ever come to an end? Now let's discuss how we arrived at this conclusion that something significant has happened within the Central Military Commission, and then we'll delve into the reasons behind it, its implications for the Chinese military, its future military alliances with Russia and North Korea, and its impact on the Taiwan Strait situation. Signs of trouble in the Central Military Commission. Li Shangfu issued a notice at the end of July, asking the public to report corruption within the military's equipment procurement system. In essence, this was already a sign that something was amiss. This month, he traveled to Russia. In reality, the top echelons of the CCP follow certain ironclad rules. As long as the final decision-maker hasn't arrested you or you haven't been removed in the middle of a meeting, it means the organization hasn't made a final decision. This is considered a stage of internal struggle, where they aim to resolve issues within the organization and fight for their interests. We hope this provides clarity on the situation within the Central Military Commission and the context surrounding it. Political struggle and organizational discipline. The process of resolving background conflicts is essentially a political struggle. This process is not easily known even within high-level organizational systems, including central committee offices. It involves activities such as senior officials visiting each other, old leaders making phone calls, and chief secretaries sending gifts to each other's spouses. These events are low-key but highly significant in terms of protocol. When someone is in trouble, they must maintain a facade of normalcy externally. They continue to perform their duties and meet with foreign dignitaries as usual. They cannot show weakness or openly reveal conflicts. Resisting or making the struggle public goes against organizational discipline. At such times, no one is willing to come to your aid. For example, Xi'an, before the events of June 4th, openly revealed the internal conflicts within the Central Committee to Gorbachev. This was a major taboo, and in the end, no one could save him. A humble life and trusting the organization. On the other hand, one cannot appear weak either. For instance, if you spend the whole night lying flat, take leave from meetings, or even resort to self-harm as a form of resistance, you will be severely criticized. No matter how high your position and influence are, in this situation, you are just like the ordinary citizens during the Cultural Revolution, facing helplessness and praying for a bit less expired or counterfeit products in the next batch of supplies from the neighborhood committee, as your basic survival requirements quickly diminish. You must lead a humble life. This is why even individuals who have reached the positions of General Secretary, Premier, or Supreme Commander, when they face trouble, have no choice but to humbly say the words, "I believe in the organization. It's a matter of being helpless and unable to do anything else." To put it in perspective, when Mikhail Gorbachev faced the crisis in the former Soviet Union, it became clear that there were no real men left, except for him. Those were real men. Those who stood up against evil, negated their entire life's values, and had the courage to deny their own evil existence. Only by doing this did they have a chance at renewal. See, the ongoing investigation into military equipment procurement. Now let's bring the discussion back to the present. Whether someone appears in public or not is a symbol of their political status. It's not about showing personal strength or weakness anymore. It's about the organization's established rhythm and whether they have taken mandatory actions to allow you to appear in public. Public appearance is the only path for evaluating one's position within the system. This is something you cannot afford to miss. On September 15th, the People's Liberation Army held a meeting to summarize the first batch of thematic education and deployment for the second batch of thematic education. This meeting was not limited to the Central Military Commission. It was conducted as required in all central government agencies, ministries, and provinces. You can find reports on this in newspapers and media platforms. In every organization, the top leadership team was present. For example, in the State Council's agencies, Shang, the Secretary of the Party Committee and Director of the State-Owned Assets Supervision and Administration Commission, had to preside over the meeting. In Chongqing, Yuan Jiaguang, the Secretary of the Chong Central Military Commission, and Zhang Shengmin, the Secretary of the Commission for Discipline Inspection of the Central Military Commission, were absent. Shang Fu, a member of the Central Military Commission and the Minister of National Defense, was also absent, as was Lu Zhenlai, a member of the Central Military Commission. Personnel told him that he could fill in the invoice as he liked. Even multiplying the unit price by 100 times was no problem. The money in between would be shared among everyone. If you don't fill it out this way, you won't do business with the military in the future. These officials were all part of Zhang Yuxia's old team, and many things may have gone through Zhang Yuxia, bypassing Lai Shangfu with direct orders from Zhang Yuxia. Zhang Yuxia can't escape this connection, and he can't save it. Zhang Yuxia and Lai Shangfu had a close relationship with Xi's family, and I believe it's challenging to label them with a political hat like anti-party or rebellion. The problem here is the massive profit chain involved in military equipment procurement. From the current situation, it appears that the trigger for the Rocket Force's trouble, which is the unit most in need of modern technology upgrades, was the direct cause. But considering the current situation where Xi Jinping cannot tolerate having Zhang Yuxia removed, it's clear that cutting it off at 6 years ago is impossible. After Li Shangfu was put under control on September 1st, he reportedly implicated 8 senior officials, 6 of whom are at the military level. If we consider the military level, then his subordinates in various bureaus are all at the military level. When 6 military-level officials are exposed, it's equivalent to 6 military systems and 6 military-level bureaus being eliminated. The most comprehensive branch of the military, closer to modern warfare tactics, recently conducted a military exercise. However, General, he weighed on, not only lacks combat experience and experience in commanding large-scale military exercises like this, but also the exercise he planned after becoming the commander of the Eastern Theater Command. Known worldwide was the Chinese military's encirclement exercise against Taiwan following Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. This exercise not only exposed the main implementation plan of China's island blockade against Taiwan, but also highlighted significant flaws, such as the inability to complete the encirclement and vulnerable points within the plan. Moreover, missiles intentionally flew into Japan's exclusive economic zone, creating a provocative situation. This missile incursion into Japan's economic zone was one of the most negative aspects of the various scenarios, as it not only violated China's commitment to the international community after the Second Taiwan Strait crisis, where they pledged missiles will not fly over Taiwan, but also directly provoked political and military responses from Japan. This led to Japan moving its missile defense system to Yonaguni Island near Taiwan in just a few months. Attended the deputy chairman of the Central Military Commission, ENNMCMLA, with political and military failures, which created conflicts with He Weidong's practical military command abilities. One might wonder if Xi Jinping's protective stance toward He Weidong is the reason behind Liu Zhenli's removal. In other words, was Liu Zhenli demoted to safeguard He Weidong's position? Given the uncertain fate of Zhang Yuzi, if He Weidong were to become the top leader, he would naturally choose someone he can trust to manage things. On September 15th, the headline of the Chinese military newspaper reported a rare acknowledgement of their shortcomings concerning the development of the rocket force. It mentioned the need to address the shortcomings and weaknesses affecting the combat readiness of the units. It's exceptionally unusual for the Chinese military to publicly admit such shortcomings. As for the specific weaknesses, the article noted that the rocket force had been in a state of constant movement for an extended period, making it difficult for temporary party organizations to ensure the troops are ready to disperse and gather across great distances. In other words, when troops are dispersed for combat and require mobility and concealment, maintaining centralized control as the party does becomes difficult. This is a problem reminiscent of the Russian military's command system, which suffered in the Ukraine conflict. Modern warfare requires a more decentralized approach, similar to the one adopted by the Ukrainian military. It enhances operational efficiency and allows commanders to respond swiftly to rapidly changing conditions on the battlefield. What we see here is an attempt to learn from U.S. military tactics by General Liu Zhenli during military exercises, focusing on the concept of elite force operations. This concept involves dispersing troops and allowing them to operate independently, which is somewhat akin to decentralization. The commander-in-chief's role is to coordinate different branches, calling in air support when needed or arranging long-range artillery support. This approach to warfare is the right one, but it appears to face resistance from those who uphold Xi Jinping's highly centralized command philosophy. Even if this is not the real reason behind Liu Zhenli's removal, it's clear that the remaining 3 members of the Central Military Commission do not have a background in actual combat. General He Weidong is seen as Xi Jinping's military messenger, while Miao Hua and Zhang Shengmen are tasked with political cleansing rather than fighting. Therefore, there is no one left within the Central Military Commission who is genuinely capable of leading a battle. The final part of the article in the Ply Daily mentions that the party committee is focusing on optimizing the combat readiness process and ensuring a smooth command structure. Firming up organizational development and conducting in-depth research on specific topics is self-explanatory when it comes to strengthening the party's foundation. Opening up command channels is even more amusing. But before diving into that, let's clarify what optimizing combat readiness processes means. For instance, in the latter half of last year, a particular unit of the PLA acquired a significant amount of equipment and supplies during its training period. However, when they returned to their base, there was chaos in storing and managing these resources. To put it bluntly, it's reminiscent of the situation when, after the dissolution of the former Soviet Union, they noticed a couple of nuclear warheads missing after training exercises. This is what we are talking about. Open discussion of rocket force issues by Plan newspaper. Is this the top echelon of the CCP trying to get a grip on the General Logistics Department after the General Equipment Department? It's challenging to say for sure. After acquiring resources, how to distribute them, transport them, and allocate them is the responsibility of the General Logistics Department, which is also in dire need of reform. As for command channels, both the new commander and political commissar of the rocket force come from backgrounds unrelated to missile operations, one from the Air Force and the other from the Navy. For the mid-level and senior commanders below them, this is like having leaders who don't fully understand the intricacies of missile operations. The problem of ineffective command is likely to persist. The fact that the PLA newspaper openly discussed issues within the rocket force indicates that this is not a minor problem. The CCP has been studying the situation in the Russia-Ukraine conflict closely. Russia's failures had a significant impact on the CCP's strategic thinking. In May of this year, Putin inquired about Moscow's air defense system, questioning why so many drones were penetrating and bombing the capital. This led to a massive scandal. The advanced Voronezh radar system, which Putin had been proud of, was supposed to detect objects as small as a soccer ball from a distance of 8,000 kilometers. But now, it can't even detect drones larger than soccer balls. The scandal resulted from contractors extensively using cheap and unsuitable foreign components, rendering these warning systems almost paralyzed. Such corruption in military procurement is widespread in Russia. Now, Putin is forced to redeploy S-300 and S-400 air defense systems, which were being used elsewhere, to protect Moscow's elite circle during wartime. In fact, it's almost inevitable that this kind of change will happen within the PLA's organizational structure once a conflict involving Taiwan breaks out. The vast PLA will ultimately only be able to defend a small portion of a limited elite. However, even if problems are identified, governing corruption with harsh measures is akin to the current situation within the Central Military Commission, where only 3 of the 6 members are still in power. What good is it to cut off your arm if you have nothing left to wield your sword with? The pyramid-shaped command system, designed to protect the leader's power, has no chance of success. There's no hope of winning in modern warfare. If Xi Jinping hasn't completely lost his sense, he might reconsider his plans to invade Taiwan, especially given China's economic challenges. However, what motivates Xi Jinping is not rationality, but rather the decision Mao Zedong made in 1950. Mao joined the Korean War when China was extremely impoverished and faced the overwhelmingly superior U.S. military. He thought, if Mao Zedong could win back then, I can win now. Of course, Mao's win at the time was also a somewhat questionable victory. And that is today's episode. If you found this video informative, please subscribe and ring a bell to get notification. Thank you for watching and see you next time.